like Randy Orton and the Usos to face the League of Nations, of course, Sheamus, Del Rio, Alberto Del Rio, so many great names would be involved in that program. Again, a great opportunity for WWE to create something special. I'm just really proud that people like Rusev and King Barrett have turned their careers around. Not so much Sheamus and Del Rio needed to turn their careers around because off his return, Del Rio became the United States Champion, defeating John Cena, which so many people have done. It's really original to come in your first match or with a return and defeat John Cena for a championship or just defeat John Cena. Carlito, of course, defeated John Cena. So many people have done it in that category, putting themselves in the category that Del Rio was in off his return after being exported back to Mexico, having something to do with his visa. So many people have suffered from the same circumstance. So Del Rio came back really effectively, but it's just the whole thing with King Barrett and Rusev. I mean, take, for instance, the King of the Ring tournament of 2015. Usually the King of the Ring award winner had something promising happening for them in the fall to winning the tournament. Either they become champion or they'd be in the main events against Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels from back in the day. But now what we're seeing with the King of the Ring tournament is it's just a gimmick that's given to somebody and nothing is really done with it. Take, for instance, King Regal. They tried to do something with King Regal as both the general manager and the King of the Ring off his victory of CM Punk in the finals in 2008. But what did they really do? They called him the most powerful entity in WWE. They never gave him a championship. They never really gave him an opportunity to really stand out as the King of the Ring. The same thing with Sheamus. King Sheamus was ridiculous. Remember when they gave Sheamus the crown and the cape? And he was going around calling himself the king, and then he was on a losing streak. Then he got rid of the king gimmick, and he became United States Champion because WWE realized they had to kill the gimmick before Sheamus headed down a very precarious road, and he was as the King of the Ring. And it seemed like Wade Barrett was headed down that same road off of victories over people like Neville on the WWE Network, and that really showed me that WWE really didn't have any confidence in the King of the Ring tournament to make it exclusive to the network and not to the public who aren't even subscribed to the network. So obviously they felt that King Barrett was headed down the same path, so that's why they threw him in to the League of Nations when they did, and obviously they made a great move because now King Barrett has turned his career around. He's taken more seriously now after being called Bad News Barrett, in that comedy segment on Raw when he'd come out and just make fun of something for something to do and just to make himself noticed in WWE. And even though he was trying to make himself noticed, it wasn't as effective as what they're doing with him now. I think the King gimmick, as ridiculous as that was far more effective than having him come out making fun of different situations and or circumstances as Bad News Barrett. Although I was a fan of Bad News Barrett and the whole idea of Boom. The way I thought that they should have went with Wade Barrett and Boom was the way they did with Daniel Bryan and the whole Yes movement, having the fans really getting behind Boom, and here comes Wade Barrett. I was really hoping we were going to see Boom going up against Yes, and we'd see Wade Barrett versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE Championship. I really thought Wade Barrett could have been the man as Bad News Barrett. That was a great opportunity, and now they finally realized the potential of Barrett just under a different gimmick, and hopefully they can save Barrett before it's too late, and that's what I'm hoping to see for King Barrett as part of the League of Nations. Now, as far as Zeb Coulter factoring into all this, obviously, yes, he's the voice, one of the voices, with Sheamus obviously being the lead voice and the spokesperson for the League of Nations. He's either the voice or the manager. Of course, Zeb Coulter has a tremendous amount of experience, which he can offer to the new talented initial wrestlers who are in this group. I mentioned how they're a far cry from groups like the Four Horsemen, even the New World Order. It's going to be a long time before they get to that point. What they're going to have to do to get to the point of the New World Order, obviously, is expand with more nations being in this group, but Zeb Coulter at least is the voice and the manager of this group, and he can offer a lot of experience. I remember from watching him back in the 90s, of course, when he was managing the Blues Brothers in 1995, Jacob and Eli Blue, and he had a couple of different roles outside of that. In WWE, he was gone for a number of years. Seeing him come back with people like Alberto Del Rio and Jack Swagger, that was great for him in WWE, returning a legend into the storylines, and obviously he's going to take that experience and apply it to the League of Nations and see what he can offer to them. I also really appreciate the mid-card feuds that we are seeing between people like Del Rio and Jack Swagger. I think that's great because people like Jack Swagger are still relevant in 2016, and I think they're going to be there for a long period of time. Just when you think it's over for people like Jack Swagger, it's because of these innovative factions like the League of Nations that he has issues with Del Rio. And it just goes to show, how little of something can create a storyline, how little of something a storyline can be created off of. When they had nothing for Jack Swagger, they had Del Rio and Zeb Coulter team up. Of course, we all know the history between Jack Swagger and Zeb Coulter when Swagger, of course, was main eventing WrestleMania against Del Rio for the championship a couple of years ago, and they tied that in very significantly. So it gave Jack Swagger something to do, and these mid-card feuds with Del Rio and Del Rio and Kalisto, rather, for the United States Championship, at least it creates something special for these new talented wrestlers, which is what you have to do coming off of things like all of these injuries and in light of Daniel Bryan's retirement. You have to create stars before it is too late, because that's what the business needs. It needs new stars, and it really needs a feeling of novelty, because without that feeling of novelty, you really have nothing to fall back on. Obviously, having to go back and rewrite everything because of Seth Rollins being taken out of the main event picture because of injury was a pain in the ass. It was very painful to me having to see them go back and rewrite everything. I was not a fan of Seth Rollins, I will admit that to you, but at least Seth Rollins is the champion. He was their new CM Punk. He was there to get on our nerves, talking about wrestling psychology earlier, going back to that, reiterating that fact for you. I think that wrestling psychology with Rollins was great. Having to go back and rewrite everything at least benefited the League of Nations. If it benefited any four individuals, it obviously was Sheamus, Rusev, Del Rio, and King Barrett, and obviously now what we are seeing is more of a promising future for them in affiliation with the McMahons and the Authority in the way of Triple H and John Laurinaitis. Everybody are huge fans of the League of Nations, and they're going to have to be fans of the League of Nations if you want to have something for your biggest night of the year, WrestleMania. Here you're coming up on WrestleMania, and you have nothing for the League of Nations to do. You have nothing for this one or that one to do, and really what you're falling back on are all these injuries. You know, that's coming back to haunt you, and overworking wrestlers, which is why in the mid part of 2016, by the time we get to that, I hope you're not still overworking wrestlers in the way of Randy Orton and John Cena. Hopefully you will learn from these treacherous experiences where you've overworked them, and as a result of that, they're not headlining WrestleMania. Yeah, people like Edge and Shawn Michaels have never headlined WrestleMania before because of injuries, but you had way too many big-name wrestlers around the times that people like Triple H and Shawn Michaels were going down with injuries. It was almost like they were never missed. Yeah, you had your fans out there of Triple H and Edge, for say, but it was almost like they weren't missed. They were just a blemish on the DL because you had so many names like The Undertaker, Kane, The Rock, Steve Austin, and even when The Rock and Steve Austin would go down with major injuries, you still had people like The Undertaker and Kane and Mick Foley, who were in the six figures in WWE, you know, making the biggest kind of money to take bumps like Mick Foley would off the top of the Hell in a Cell, easily in the six figures. And when you had wrestlers, so many of them in the six figures like The Rock and Mick Foley, you really didn't notice these injuries as much as what you are now, because you don't have as many wrestlers in the six figures as what you did back in 98 or 99 when the Attitude Era was in full force. So now it's kind of haunting WWE, you know, having to overwork people like John Cena and Randy Orton, and I'm hoping they don't do it again. What I see for John Cena's future is either a feud with Del Rio in a one-on-one program, or with the entire League of Nations, as I mentioned, going out and finding some partners for an 8-man tag team match, probably like Extreme Rules or by Money in the Bank, probably before SummerSlam, if not at SummerSlam. John Cena's return is going to be big, and I think August is going to be a really big month. Along with John Cena's return, you have the return of Seth Rollins. We're coming up on the returns of Randy Orton and Sin Cara. The Lucha Dragons were big-time players in the tag team division before going down, and it was believed by me the Lucha Dragons were up against the New Day for this year's WrestleMania for the tag team titles, and they were going to be over because they had knocked off the New Day in previous non-title matches, and obviously WWE, because of their popularity based off that and that alone, we're going to put them up for the tag team titles this year at WrestleMania, and it's been put off. So now, who comes in to fill the void? It's probably going to have to be the Dudley Boys, because they're on their 20th anniversary this coming April or May. I think it was. Originally, I thought it was February, but I think it was April or May, actually. WWE confirmed. We're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Dudleys. And Bubba Ray Dudley, actually, on WWE.com, prior to a pay-per-view, said that in February of 2016, I think he miscalculated, they were celebrating their 20th anniversary of the team, the Dudley Boys. But apparently now they're saying they're confirming it's April or May they're going to be doing it. So I think with WrestleMania this close, the Dudleys are going to be the ones that come in and replace the Lucha Dragons in the program with the New Day. Right now for WrestleMania, it's going to be put off for a little while longer, because right now for WrestleMania, what it looks like is The Rock and the Usos teaming up against the three members of the New Day, Ezekiel Jackson, Kofi Kingston, and Xavier Woods. Very entertaining program, and later on down the road, that's when we'll see the Dudleys facing the New Day, if not as early as the night after WrestleMania and all of its fallout. So, there's a lot going on for the League of Nations, regardless of how you feel about them or how you're looking at professional wrestling. And even though we've seen so many injuries and so many unfortunate circumstances with the heartbreaking news, of course, of Bret Hart's cancer and Daniel Bryan's retirement, it seems like every bit of news we're reading about these days is very depressing, but I can't blame the wrestling news websites for discussing the League of Nations as much as what they had been. They obviously realize how much the League of Nations are over. To the everyday wrestling fan, you may be saying to yourself, what are the League of Nations, the Four Horsemen, or the Generation X? These wrestling fans who are big fans of things of the past, or people like John Cena who don't read the wrestling news websites. What I recommend you do are go to pro wrestling news websites like prowrestling.com and .net, even PW Insider or PW Torch, and really read the news, because these wrestling news websites, sometimes they don't know what they're talking about, but more times they do. And I know this because I've profiled wrestling, I've written about it, I've documented it on my YouTube channel, in my audio archives, my radio forum, on my website. I know what it is about professional wrestling, and these news websites, more times than often that they're ever given credit for, are pretty accurate on some of their assumptions. They know the League of Nations are something to take very seriously in WWE. They may not have been early on, but from what I've been reading on these wrestling news websites, obviously the League of Nations are over, and they are something to be taken far more seriously than what we are ever giving them credit for. And that's the thing. People like The Miz, Damian Mizdown, CM Punk, people like that, even the League of Nations, fitting them into that category, are never given enough credit or taken far enough seriously. And I think if they were taken more seriously, I think WWE would have more confidence in them, and we'd probably be seeing more done with them. They say wrestling fans don't have really much say in the wrestling business, but if you're not over with the wrestling